The cabin of the Boeing 777 fell deathly silent as Emma Carter's hand shook, clutching my platinum shareholder card like it was a live grenade. Blood dripped from my split lip onto my white tee, each drop a reminder of the assault I'd just endured. But it was Emma's face pale, eyes wide with terror, that held my attention. This can't be real, she stammered, her voice cracking as she read the embossed text. Olivia Marshall, major shareholder, 45% Skywave Airlines. I stood in the aisle, my 5'6" frame unwavering despite the pain, and said, "It's real, and you just attacked the woman who owns nearly half this airline." The words landed like a thunderclap, and I saw Michael Hayes, the tall flight attendant who'd gripped my arm, step back, his confidence crumbling. Sarah Nugent, the younger crew member, looked like she might cry. But Emma, the ringleader, didn't crumble. Her jaw tightened, and for a fleeting moment, I saw defiance flicker in her eyes, a glimpse of the woman who'd spent 25 years enforcing her version of order on Skywave flights. This wasn't over. I'd grown up in Detroit, where my mom, Grace, taught me to read people's intentions in their silences. Emma's silence now screamed resentment, not remorse. She'd profiled me from the moment I boarded her suspicions, fueled by my black skin and casual clothes, and even now, with my power revealed, she wasn't ready to yield. I thought of the times I'd faced that same defiance: venture capitalists who smirked at my startup pitches, neighbors who called the cops when I moved into a gated Miami community. Each time, I'd turned their doubt into fuel, building a $5 billion empire. But this moment wasn't about me alone. It was about every passenger who'd been humiliated because of their race. Every person who'd swallowed their dignity to avoid a scene. I wouldn't let Emma's defiance win. The cabin buzzed with whispers as passengers recorded, their phones flashing like fireflies. The livestream from a suited businessman, now at 200,000 views, had ignited X with #SkywaveJustice. I caught the eye of Hannah Lee, the Asian lawyer who'd spoken up when I was dragged from my seat. She gave a small nod, her courage a spark in the tense air. "Ms. Marshall," Emma said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We had no idea who you were. Let's get you cleaned up and resolve this quietly." Her tone was syrupy, but I saw the calculation behind it: minimize, deflect, control. She'd spent decades perfecting this act, I realized, learning it from a career where passengers like me were always suspect. Emma, I'd later learn, grew up in a small Ohio town, her worldview shaped by a family that saw diversity as a threat. She'd climbed Skywave's ranks by enforcing a rigid hierarchy, and my presence in first class challenged everything she believed about who belonged. "No," I said, my voice steady despite the throbbing in my lip. "This isn't about who I am, it's about what you did, assaulting a passenger because you assumed I didn't belong. I want your crew off this flight, and I want the captain." Emma's smile vanished, replaced by a flash of anger. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she snapped, then caught herself, lowering her voice. "We were following protocol. Fraudulent bookings are common." The lie was bold, and I felt a surge of fury. "Protocol," I said, holding up my phone, still recording. "It's grabbing me, splitting my lip." "Part of your handbook," passengers murmured, and Hannah stood again. "She's right," Hannah said. "I'm a lawyer, and what you did violates federal law. You can't dodge this." Emma shot her a venomous look, but I saw her confidence waver as the livestream hit 300,000 views. Michael, sweating now, tried to mediate. "Ma'am, let's talk to the captain and sort this out." But Emma cut him off. "We don't need the captain for a seating issue," she said, her voice sharp. I realized then that Emma wasn't just protecting her job, she was protecting her identity. The belief that she was right to doubt me. I'd met people like her before, gatekeepers who thrived on control, who saw my success as an anomaly, not a truth. In boardrooms, I'd faced men who questioned my numbers. On this flight, Emma questioned my right to exist in her space. "This isn't a seating issue," I said, my words carrying to the cabin. "It's discrimination, and I'm not moving until it's addressed." The word discrimination hung heavy, and even Margaret Evans, the older woman who'd refused to sit beside me, shifted uncomfortably. The captain, Daniel Brooks, emerged from the cockpit, his 6-foot frame commanding attention. A 30-year, that veteran with a calm baritone. He took one look at my bloodied shirt and the trembling crew and frowned. "Ms. Marshall, what happened?" he asked, his concern genuine. I recounted the assault, my voice steady but laced with the pain of a lifetime of similar slights. "Your crew profiled me, harassed me, and physically removed me from my seat," I said, gesturing to my lip, now bandaged by the onboard doctor. "All because they couldn't believe a black woman belonged in first class." Daniel's jaw tightened, and he turned to Emma. "Is this true?" Emma hesitated, then said, "We thought there was a booking error, sir. We were protecting our premium passengers." The excuse was flimsy, and Daniel's eyes narrowed. "You assaulted a passenger over an assumption?" he asked, his voice low but sharp. I seized the moment, pulling out my notebook. "Captain, I've flown Skywave for years, documenting how passengers like me are treated. I have data hundreds of cases where people of color were questioned, downgraded, or ignored. This isn't one bad day. It's your culture. Daniel's expression shifted, a mix of shock and recognition. He'd seen it. I realized maybe not this blatant, but the subtle slights, the uneven service. I want these 3 off the flight, I said, pointing to Emma, Michael, and Sarah. They've shown they can't treat passengers fairly. Emma's face reddened. You can't do this, she hissed, stepping closer. I've given 25 years to this airline. You think you can ruin me because you've got money? Her words were a slap, but I held her gaze. I'm not ruining you, I said. You did that when you chose prejudice over policy. Daniel nodded. Emma, Michael, Sarah, gather your things and exit the aircraft. Report to management in Miami. Sarah's eyes welled up, and Michael looked stunned, but Emma's defiance held. This isn't fair, she said, her voice low, meant for me. You're playing the race card to get your way. The accusation cut deep, echoing every time I'd been told I was too sensitive or overreacting. I thought of my mom, who'd faced worse as a black woman in the 80s, smiling through slurs to keep her job. The only card I played, I said, holding up the platinum one, is the one you forced me to show. Emma stormed off, her footsteps heavy, but I knew she wasn't done. Her resentment was a fire that wouldn't burn out easily. As replacement crew boarded, delaying our takeoff by 45 minutes, I sat back in 1A, my notebook open. Passengers whispered, some offering tentative smiles, others avoiding my gaze. Hannah approached her business card in hand. I'm Hannah Lee, environmental lawyer, she said. What you did took guts. If you need a witness, I'm here. I thanked her, touched by her courage. She reminded me of my younger self, fighting for a seat at tables that didn't want me. Margaret Evans, the woman who'd shunned me, hovered nearby, her pearls glinting. I didn't mean to offend, she said, her voice quavering. I just like window seats. The lie was transparent, and I sighed. Mrs. Evans, we both know why you moved. The question is whether you'll admit it. She flushed, retreating without a word, but her discomfort was a start. My phone buzzed with alerts. My assistant, Marcus, texting that the livestream had hit 500,000 views, and Skywave's stock was down 6%. News crews were waiting at Miami International. I ignored the noise, focusing on my notebook. I sketched a plan, a real-time app for passengers to report discrimination, a scholarship in my mom's name, a public forum to hear Skywave's customers. This wasn't just about Emma's actions, it was about a system that let her thrive. I thought of my first big pitch, at 25, when a white investor told me, "You're impressive, but you don't fit our brand." I'd built my company to prove him wrong. And now I'd rebuild Skywave to prove Emma wrong, not with vengeance, but with vision. The plane began its taxi, and I looked out at the San Francisco tarmac, the city's fog a blur. Emma's face haunted me, not because of her cruelty, but because she was a product of something bigger. She'd learned to see people like me as threats, and Skywave had let her. I remembered a moment from my teens, when a teacher accused me of cheating because my essay was too good. My mom had fought for me, her voice shaking but firm, and I'd promised myself I'd never let anyone make me feel small again. As we climbed to 35,000 feet, I knew this flight was more than a journey to Miami. It was the start of a fight to make Skywave a place where no one felt small, no matter their skin or their seat. But as the seatbelt sign dinged off, my phone lit up with a new post from an anonymous account. Olivia Marshall's lying. She provoked the crew. Don't believe the hype. My heart sank. Emma, or someone like her, was fighting back, and the battle was far from won. The moment I handed Emma Carter my platinum shareholder card, the air in the Boeing 777's first-class cabin turned to stone. My lip throbbed, blood seeping through the butterfly bandage a passenger doctor had applied, staining my white tee. As I stood in the aisle, my 5'6" frame unyielding, Emma's hands trembled, her eyes locked on the embossed text. Olivia Marshall, major shareholder, 45% Skywave Airlines. This has to be a mistake, she whispered, her voice splintering like glass. I met her gaze, steady despite the pain. No mistake, Emma. You just assaulted the woman who owns nearly half this airline. The words cut through the cabin, and I saw Michael Hayes, the tall flight attendant who'd gripped my arm, stagger back, his face ashen. Sarah Nguyen, younger and visibly shaken, clutched her badge like a lifeline. But Emma, the ringleader, didn't break. Her lips tightened, and a flicker of defiance sparked in her eyes, a defiance I recognized from a lifetime of facing gatekeepers who saw my black skin as a threat. I'd built a $5 billion tech empire from the ashes of Detroit's toughest streets, but in that moment, I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for every person who'd been doubted, diminished, or hurt because of their race. And Emma's resentment was a wall I'd have to tear down. Growing up, my mom, Grace, taught me to read the unspoken in people's faces. Emma's face now screamed a story of its own 25 years at Skywave. Clawing her way up from a small Ohio town where, I'd later learn, her family viewed diversity as a disruption to their ordered world, she'd thrived by enforcing a hierarchy where passengers like me didn't belong in first class. Not unless we proved ourselves beyond our skin. Her defiance wasn't just personal, it was a shield for a worldview that justified her actions. I thought of the venture capitalists who'd smirked at my AI startup pitches, the neighbors who'd stared when I bought my Miami penthouse. Each time I'd turned their doubt into fuel, but Emma's resistance was different, personal, and dangerous. She wasn't just fighting me, she was fighting the idea that I could belong at all. The cabin buzzed with tension, passengers' phones flashing as they recorded, their whispers like a rising tide. A white businessman's live stream on X had hit 250,000 views, the hashtag Skywave Justice exploding across the platform. I caught the eye of Hannah Lee, the 32-year-old environmental lawyer who'd stood up when I was dragged from my seat. Her nod was a quiet anchor, her courage a reminder of what I was fighting for. "Ms. Marshall," Emma said, forcing a smile that was all teeth, "we didn't know who you were. Let's get you medical attention and fix this quietly." The voice was smooth, but I saw the calculation behind it. Deflect, minimize, survive. She'd perfected this act over decades, I realized, sidelining passengers who didn't fit her vision of premium. I'd seen it in my data, collected over 4 years of flying Skywave incognito. Black and brown passengers questioned twice as often. Their complaints dismissed 70% more than white passengers. This wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern, and Emma was its enforcer. "I don't want quiet," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "You targeted me because of how I look, not my ticket. I want your crew off this flight, and I want the captain." Emma's smile vanished, replaced by a flash of fury. "You're overreacting," she snapped, then caught herself, lowering her voice to a hiss. "We were protecting our passengers from fraudulent bookings. It's policy." The lie was so bold it stung, like the time a college professor accused me of plagiarizing a paper because it was too polished. I'd fought then, and I fought now. "Policy doesn't include assault," I said, tilting my phone to show the active recording. "You grabbed me, split my lip, and lied about an error. That's not policy, that's prejudice." The cabin's silence deepened, passengers shifting uncomfortably. Hannah stood again, her voice shaking but firm. "She's right. I'm a lawyer, and this violates federal anti-discrimination laws. You can't dodge this." Emma's glare at Hannah was venomous, but I saw her confidence crack as the live stream hit 400,000 views, the world watching her unravel. Michael, his face slick with sweat, tried to intervene. "Ma'am, let's talk to the captain and sort this out." But Emma cut him off, her voice sharp as a blade. "We don't need the captain for a seating dispute." She leaned closer, her words for me alone. "You think you can ruin me with that card? I've kept this airline running for 25 years. Her defiance was a mirror to every time I'd been told I didn't belong at board meetings, in luxury stores, at my own company's launch. I thought of my mum, who'd faced worse as a nurse's aide, smiling through slurs to keep food on our table. "You're not running anything right now," I said, my voice low but firm. "You're answering for assaulting a passenger." The word assault landed like a gavel, and even Margaret Evans, the older woman who'd refused to sit beside me, clutched her pearls, her face pale. Captain Daniel Brooks emerged from the cockpit, his 6-foot frame steady, his 30 years of flying etched in his calm demeanor. He took one look at my bloodied shirt and the frozen crew and frowned. "Ms. Marshall, what's going on?" he asked, his baritone cutting through the tension. I recounted the ordeal, Emma's accusations, Michael's grip, Sarah's complicity, the metal seat frame splitting my lip. "They assumed I didn't belong in first class," I said, gesturing to the bandage. "This is what happens when your crew acts on prejudice instead of policy." Daniel's jaw tightened, and he turned to Emma. "Is this accurate?" Emma's eyes darted, but she doubled down. "We suspected a booking error, sir. We were protecting our premium passengers." The excuse was flimsy, and Daniel's voice hardened. "You assaulted a passenger over an assumption." He glanced at my card, still in Emma's hand, and his eyes widened. "You didn't know she owns 45% of Skywave." I seized the opening, pulling my notebook from my bag. "Captain, I've flown Skywave for years, documenting how passengers like me are treated. I have dated 1,000 flights, 200 cases of racial disparities in service. Black passengers are questioned 60% more, downgraded 30% more. This isn't one bad crew, it's your culture." Daniel's face shifted, a mix of shock and guilt. I knew he'd seen it, maybe not this blatant, but the subtle slights, the uneven smiles. "I want these 3 off the flight," I said, pointing to Emma, Michael, and Sarah. "They've proven they can't treat passengers fairly." Emma's face flushed crimson. "You can't do this," she hissed, stepping so close I could smell her perfume. "I've given my life to this airline. You're just playing the victim to get your way." The accusation hit like a slap, echoing every time I'd been called angry for speaking truth. I thought of my first big pitch at 25, when an investor said, "You're too emotional for this industry." I'd built my empire to prove him wrong, and I wouldn't let Emma rewrite this story. "You didn't give your life to Skywave," I said, my voice steel. "You gave it to a system that lets you decide who belongs. That ends today." Daniel nodded, his decision swift. "Emma, Michael, Sarah, gather your things and exit the aircraft. Report to management in Miami." Sarah's eyes brimmed with tears, and Michael looked stunned, but Emma's defiance held. "This is unfair," she said, her voice low. "Meant for me. You'll regret this." Her threat lingered, a promise of retaliation, and I knew she wasn't done. Her resentment was a fire fed by years of unchecked power, and I was the spark that threatened to burn it down. As the crew left, passengers murmured, some filming, others whispering. The businessman's livestream hit 600,000 views, and my phone buzzed with alerts from Marcus, my assistant. Stock down 6%. Media at Miami Airport, bored in panic. Replacement crew boarded, delaying takeoff by 40 minutes, and I returned to seat 1A, my notebook open. Hannah approached, her business card trembling in her hand. "I'm Hannah Lee, environmental lawyer. What you did was incredible. If you need a witness, I'm in." Her courage reminded me of my younger self, fighting for a scholarship at 18, proving I deserved it. "Thank you, Hannah," I said, pocketing her card. "I'll need allies." Margaret Evans hovered nearby, her voice quavering. "I didn't mean to offend Miss Marshall. I just prefer windows." Her lie was fragile, and I sighed. "Mrs. Evans, we both know why you moved. The question is whether you'll face it." She retreated, her discomfort a seed I hoped would grow. I opened my notebook, sketching a plan, a real-time app, voice of passengers, for reporting discrimination, a $1 million scholarship in my mom's name for underserved youth in aviation, a virtual day of listening to hear passenger stories. This wasn't just about Emmy, it was about dismantling the system that empowered her. I thought of my mom, who'd fought for me when a teacher accused me of cheating at 16, her voice shaking but resolute. As we climbed to 35,000 feet, my phone lit up with an anonymous X-post. "Olivia Marshall's faking it. She provoked the crew. Don't fall for it." My heart sank. Emma, or someone like her, was fighting back, and the war was just beginning. As the Boeing 777 touched down at Miami International Airport, my phone buzzed with a new X-post from an anonymous account. "Olivia Marshall staged the whole thing. Don't let her ruin Skywave." The words hit like a punch, twisting the knife of Emma Carter's defiance from 35,000 feet above. My lip, still stinging under the butterfly bandage, was a raw reminder of the assault I'd endured, but this digital attack felt just as vicious. I stepped off the plane into a frenzy of camera flashes and shouted questions. "Ms. Marshall, will you sue Skywave? Is it true you own 45%? The media swarm confirming the livestream's reach had soared past 1 million views. I clutched my notebook, its pages filled with 4 years of data on Skywave's discriminatory patterns, and felt a fire ignite in my chest. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about dismantling a system that let Emma's prejudice thrive. And as I walked through the terminal, flanked by my assistant Marcus, I knew the real battle awaited in Dallas, at Skywave's headquarters, where I'd face a board that might try to bury this storm. Marcus, 34-year-old with a knack for staying calm under pressure, matched my brisk pace, his tablet glowing with updates. "Boards in panic mode," he said, his voice low. "James Larson, the CEO, called 8 times. They've drafted a generic apology, but they're waiting for your word." I snorted, the idea of a bland press release infuriating me. "No apologies yet," I said, my mind racing. "This needs more than words." My thoughts flashed to my mom, Grace, who taught me in Detroit to turn pain into purpose. When I was 12, a shopkeeper had accused me of stealing because I looked suspicious. Mom had marched me back to that store, her nurse's aide uniform still on, and demanded an apology. Her strength was in my bones now, and I wouldn't let Skywave hide behind corporate platitudes. As we passed a group of travelers snapping photos, I spotted Hannah Lee, the lawyer who'd stood up for me on the flight. She stood apart from the chaos, her expression thoughtful. "Miss Marshall," she said, approaching. I meant what I said. "I'll help however I can." Her courage stirred something in me, a reminder of the allies I'd need. "Walk with," Mia said, and she fell into step beside Marcus, a quiet force in the growing storm. The drive to Dallas was a blur, my Tesla Model S cutting through 1,200 miles of highway as I prepared for the boardroom showdown. My phone buzzed from friends, colleagues, even strangers who'd seen the viral videos. One message stood out. From my mom: "You stood tall. Live now, make them listen. Love you." I smiled, the small scar on my lip pulling tight, and opened my notebook. For 4 years I'd documented Skywave's failures. 35% of ground staff were people of color, but only 5% reached management. Black passengers were questioned about their tickets 60% more often than white ones. The numbers told a story of systemic bias, and I'd used them to force change. But Emma Carter's shadow loomed. Marcus showed me a Channel 7 interview where she'd claimed I followed protocol. Ms. Marshall was disruptive, escalating a simple check. Her lie was a calculated move, painting me as the angry black woman to deflect blame. I'd learned about Emma's past from a quick background check. Marcus pulled raised in a conservative Ohio enclave. She'd joined Skywave at 25, her career built on enforcing a rigid order where people like me were always suspect. Her defiance wasn't just personal, It was a defense of a world she'd helped build, and she'd fight to protect it. At Skywave's Dallas headquarters, a 25-foot glass tower with a glowing logo, I stepped out of the car, Hannah and Marcus. At my side, the lobby was chaos, protesters chanting justice for Olivia, reporters jostling for a shot, security clearing a path. James Larson, the 60-year-old CEO, met us, his tailored suit unable to hide his anxiety. "Olivia," he said, his eyes flicking to my bandaged lip, "this is a disaster. We're sorry, and we'll hold those responsible accountable." His words were sincere but rehearsed, and I knew he hoped a quick settlement would end this. "Accountability starts with the system, James," I said, my voice firm. "Let's not keep the board waiting." We rode the elevator to the 20th floor, the silence heavy. Hannah whispered, "I've seen companies dodge like this. They'll try to isolate Emma's actions." I nodded, her insight sharpening my focus. Hannah, I'd learned, had grown up in Oakland, her parents facing similar slights as Asian immigrants. Her resolve mirrored mine, and I felt a kinship that strengthened my resolve. The conference room was a fortress of power: mahogany table, video screens with board members' faces, and Robert Klein, the 70-year-old chairman, glaring from the head. His Brooks Brothers suit screamed old money, and his scowl told me he saw me as a threat, not an ally. I stood at the table's head, my jeans and bloodied tee a stark contrast to their polished suits, and opened my laptop. "Before we begin," I said, my voice carrying a quiet authority, "watch this." Marcus connected my tablet, and the screens lit up with a passenger-filmed video, Emma's sneer as she questioned my ticket. Michael's grip on my arm, the moment my lips split against the seat. Gasps rippled through the room, and Robert's frown deepened. "This," I said, "is what happened on Flight 1423, not a misunderstanding, but discrimination enabled by Skywave's culture." I thought of my first board meeting at 30, when a white executive dismissed my AI algorithm as unproven. I'd proven him wrong then, and I'd prove Robert wrong now. I clicked to my data slides, the numbers stark. 1,000 flights observed, 200 cases of racial disparities, only 5% of executives people of color. "This isn't about Emma Carter alone," I said. "It's about a system that lets her assume a black woman in first class is a fraud." Robert leaned forward, his voice dripping with condescension. "Ms. Marshall, this is unfortunate, but let's not overgeneralize. We have diversity policies." His dismissal stung, echoing the times I'd been told my success was luck. I countered. "Policies mean nothing if they're not enforced. When did you last audit their impact, or test how your staff treats passengers like me?" His silence was deafening, and I pressed on, unveiling my plan: mandatory bias training for all 20,000 employees, a Voice of Passengers app for real-time discrimination reports, 50% diverse leadership hires by 2027, and a day of listening to hear passenger stories. "This isn't optional," I said, my voice rising. "As 45% owner, I'll push this to a shareholder vote if I must." Emma's influence lingered, her Channel 7 interview playing on a loop in my mind. Marcus showed me a new ex-post from her union rep. "Emma Carter's a scapegoat. Marshall's using her wealth to bully Skywave." The accusation burned, but it wasn't new. At 28, a competitor had spread rumors I'd gamed my way to funding. I'd fought back with results, and I would now, but Emma's fight was personal. Shed emailed the board. I learned, claiming I'd provoked the crew to trap them. Her desperation to rewrite the narrative was a mirror to every time I'd been blamed for others' biases. I thought of my mom, who'd faced a hospital supervisor's slurs but kept working to pay my tuition. Her resilience was my armor, and I wouldn't let Emma's lies derail me. Hannah stepped forward, her voice steady. "I'm Hannah Lee, a lawyer on your flight. I've seen companies dodge accountability, but Olivia's data is undeniable. Her plan isn't just moral, it's a business necessity." Her words bolstered me, and I saw a board member nod, a crack in their resistance. James Larson spoke, his tone cautious. "Olivia, your proposals are bold, but they're costly. Our stock's down 7%. I nodded to Marcus, who displayed a slide. "Airlines that ignored discrimination lost billions in boycotts and lawsuits." "This isn't about cost," I said. "It's about survival. Customers want fairness, and so do I." Robert Klein scoffed. "This feels like coercion, Ms. Marshall. A committee could review." I cut him off. "No committees, no delays. Every day we wait, another passenger suffers. I'm not here for comfort, I'm here for courage." A board member, Patricia Wells, spoke up. "Why didn't you share this data sooner, Olivia? 4 years is a long time." Her question was fair, and I paused, remembering my first Skywave flight. When a black family was randomly searched, I wanted to understand the problem's depth, I said, "and I hoped you'd address it without me." "You didn't." The room fell silent, and I felt the weight of my 45% stake. I wasn't just a passenger, I was a force they couldn't ignore. As the vote loomed, I thought of a new idea. An AI-driven app to flag biased service patterns, built with Hannah's input. It would launch with the Voice of Passengers platform, ensuring no complaint went unheard. The board's faces shifted, some defensive, others intrigued, but I knew Emma's lies and Robert's resistance would fight me every step. As the vote began, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You'll pay for this, Marshall." My heart raced. Emma was out of the cabin, but her war was far from over, and I was ready to face it. The anonymous text, "You'll pay for this." Marshall burned in my mind as I stood at the podium of Skywave Airlines' revamped training center in Dallas. 6 months after that fateful flight from San Francisco to Miami, the words, "likely," from Emma Carter or her allies, had haunted me through sleepless nights. A reminder that transforming an airline's culture was as much a battle of hearts as of systems. My lip, now healed but marked by a faint scar, tingled as I faced 250 new flight attendants, their diverse faces reflecting a new Skywave I'd fought to create. At 40, I'd gone from a silent 45% shareholder to executive chairwoman, replacing Robert Klein after his resignation. My jeans and bloodied tee from that day were gone, replaced by a tailored blazer, but the fire in my chest burned brighter than ever. I'd turned pain into purpose before building a $5 billion tech empire from Detroit's toughest streets, but this was bigger. This was about ensuring no passenger would face the humiliation I'd endured. And as I scanned the crowd, I knew Emma's shadow still loomed, her defiance a test of my resolve. The past 6 months had been a crucible. After the boardroom showdown, where my data 35% of ground staff people of color, only 5% in management had forced a vote for change, I'd poured everything into rebuilding Skywave. The Voice of Passengers app, launched within weeks, had logged 5,000 reports of bias, resolving 95% with retraining or discipline. Our new training program, mandatory for all 20,000 employees, tackled unconscious bias with real-world scenarios, using my assault as a case study. Customer satisfaction soared to 90%, especially among passengers of color. And our stock, after a 7% dip, climbed 10% as investors saw the value of fairness. But Emma Carter's fight hadn't ended. She'd leaked internal emails to a Dallas news outlet, claiming I'd manipulated the incident to seize power. Her words stung, echoing the times I'd been called too ambitious for demanding respect. I learned Emma had grown up in a segregated Ohio town, her worldview shaped by fear of change. Her 25 years at Skywave had been a fortress, and my reforms threatened to dismantle it. Yet, in a twist I hadn't expected, she'd reached out last month, requesting a meeting. I'd agreed, curious but wary, sensing her defiance might be cracking. The training center buzzed with energy, its walls adorned with our new slogan, "Every seat matters." I'd launched the campaign nationwide, a 30-second ad airing on CNN, showing passengers of all backgrounds boarding with dignity. It had 50 million views, and I felt a surge of pride as I addressed the graduates. "You're not just flight attendants," I said, my voice carrying the weight of my mom's lessons. "You're ambassadors of a Skywave that sees every passenger's humanity." My thoughts drifted to my childhood, when Mom, Grace, faced slurs as a nurse's aide but taught me to hold my head high. At 16, when a teacher accused me of cheating on a math test, she'd fought for me, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. That strength drove me now. But Emma's leaked emails had sparked a backlash. Anonymous ex-posts called me a corporate bully, and some employees resisted the new training, claiming it was too woke. I pushed through, knowing resistance was the price of change. Hannah Lee, now heading our passenger advocacy office, stood nearby, her presence a quiet anchor. She'd joined Skywave after our flight, her Oakland roots and legal expertise shaping the Voice of Passengers app into a lifeline for passengers. "You're changing an industry," she'd told me last week, her eyes bright with conviction. Her parents, Chinese immigrants, had faced their own slights, and her commitment mirrored mine. I'd also recruited Captain Daniel Brooks, whose concern on that flight had marked him as an ally. He'd revamped pilot training, emphasizing equity, and his 30-year tenure lent credibility to our reforms. Even Margaret Evans, the passenger who'd shunned me, had surprised me. After months of reflection, she'd donated $100,000 to the Grace Marshall Scholarship, funding 50 underserved youth in aviation careers. Her letter, published on X, admitted her prejudice and went viral, sparking 10,000 similar confessions. "I was wrong," she wrote. "I'm learning." Her transformation moved me, a reminder that change could reach even the most resistant hearts. But Emma was the enigma. Our meeting, held in a quiet Dallas cafe, had been tense. She sat across from me, her silver hair pulled tight, her eyes guarded. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she said, her voice low. I thought I was protecting Skywave. I studied her, seeing not just the woman who'd assaulted me but someone trapped by her own fears. "You weren't protecting Skywave," I said. "You were protecting a system that hurts people like me." She flinched, and I pressed on. "Why fight me now? The emails, the interviews, why?" She looked away, her hands twisting. "I gave 25 years to that airline. You took it away." Her pain was real, but so was mine, and I thought of every passenger she'd dismissed. "You lost your job because you chose bias over fairness," I said. but you can choose differently now. To my surprise, she'd enrolled in a bias workshop, later speaking at an aviation equity summit I'd launched, where 500 industry leaders discussed reform. Her voice shook as she admitted her mistakes, and though I didn't trust her fully, I saw a crack in her defiance, a chance for redemption. The summit, held in Miami, had been a game-changer. I'd invited 10 airlines, sharing Skywave's playbook, data-driven training, diverse hiring, passenger advocacy. A mural unveiled at Miami International, 20 feet tall, depicted me alongside the new butterfly logo, a symbol of transformation. Passengers stopped to take photos, and I felt a swell of hope. But not everyone embraced the change. A group of employees, led by a former colleague of Emma's, had resigned, posting manifestos online about forced diversity. Their resistance echoed Robert Klein's, who'd left the board but whispered to investors that I was too aggressive. I counted with results. Our stock hit a 5-year high, and the Every Seat Matters campaign drew 100,000 pledges to demand fair treatment. I thought of my first big deal at 28, when a white investor called my AI startup a gamble. I'd proven him wrong, and now I was proving Skywave's doubters wrong. One flight at a time, as the training graduates applauded, I spotted a familiar face, Sarah Nguyen, the young attendant from that flight. She'd stayed with Skywave, retrained, and now stood among the graduates, her eyes bright with purpose. "I'm sorry," she'd told me months ago, tears streaming. I didn't know how to stop it. Her guilt had driven her to mentor new hires, sharing her story to prevent repeats. Michael Hayes, however, had vanished, reportedly leaving the industry. Emma's journey was the most complex. After her summit speech, she'd emailed me, "I'm trying to understand." It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. I thought of my mom, who'd once forgiven a co-worker's slur to keep peace at work. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting," she'd said. I wouldn't forget Emma's actions, but I'd give her space to grow, knowing real change needed. Every voice, even hers. The training center's butterfly motif reminded me of my scar, a mark of pain turned into purpose. I'd launched a podcast, Stories from the Skies, sharing passenger experiences. With 100,000 downloads in a month, it gave voice to people like the Black family I'd seen searched years ago, their stories fueling my fight. As I stepped off the podium, Hannah approached, her tablet glowing. "Summit's trending," she said. "3 airlines want your playbook." I smiled, the weight of the anonymous text fading. Emma's fight had been fierce, but mine was fiercer. I thought of my mom's words at 16, "You're bigger than their doubts." I was, and so was Skywave. But as I left the center, a news alert flashed. A rival airline had hired Emma as a consultant, and her first statement called my reforms overreach. My heart sank. The battle wasn't over, and the skies ahead would test us all. The news alert flashed across my phone as I stepped onto a Skywave Airlines flight from Miami to New York, each word a sharp sting. Emma Carter joins rival airline, calls Skywave's reforms divisive overreach. My heart thudded, the faint scar on my lip pulsing as I settled into my first-class seat, no longer incognito but openly as Skywave's executive chairwoman. 6 months ago, Emma's hands had gripped my arm, her prejudice splitting my lip against a seat frame. But her latest move, consulting for Horizon Air and rallying against my changes, was a bolder strike. 40. I'd transformed Skywave from a haven of bias into an industry leader in equity. My $5 billion tech fortune fueling a vision born in Detroit's toughest streets. The Boeing 777's engines hummed, its butterfly logo gleaming on the tail at 35,000 feet, a symbol of the dignity I'd fought for. Passengers around me received warm, equal service, a far cry from that fateful flight. But Emma's defiance was a storm cloud threatening to darken our skies. As I clutched my notebook, its pages now a roadmap for a legacy beyond one airline. I knew this journey was about more than MIT, was about ensuring no one felt the sting of being less than because of their skin. And I'd face Emma's challenge with the same resolve that had carried me this far. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of transformation. The Every Seat Matters campaign, its 30-second CNN ad viewed 60 million times, had turned Skywave into a beacon of fairness, boosting our stock 15% as customers embraced a brand that saw them. The Voice of Passengers app, spearheaded by Hannah Lee, had logged 12,000 reports of bias, resolving 98% with swift action, retraining, apologies, or discipline. The Grace Marshall Scholarship, named for my mom, had launched in Dallas, funding 500 underserved youth in aviation careers, from mechanics to air traffic controllers. Mom's tears at the ribbon cutting, her nurse's aid hands steady despite years of slights, had grounded me. I'd also started the Stories from the Skies podcast, now at 200,000 downloads, sharing tales of passengers like the black pilot questioned at a gate or the Latina mother ignored by crew. Each story echoed my own, from the Detroit store clerk who'd tailed me at 12 to the investor who'd dismissed my AI startup as a long shot at 28. But Emma's new role at Horizon Air was a counterattack. Her TV interviews claiming my reforms alienated loyal staff. I dug into her past, raised in an Ohio town where difference was suspect. Her 25-year Skywave career had been a fortress of control, and my changes had cracked its walls. Her defiance wasn't just personal, it was a call to those who clung to the old ways. And it tested my vision's strength. As the plane climbed, I reflected on the fight. Becoming chairwoman after Robert Klein's resignation had been elite board members whispered I was too forceful, echoing Emma's media barbs, but our results spoke louder. Customer satisfaction hit 93%, and diverse hires reached 35%. Of leadership roles, Hannah Lee, now director of equity, had turned her Oakland tenacity into a force, her app's AI flagging bias patterns in real time. She'd shared her story on the podcast her Chinese immigrant parents profiled at stores, her own ID questioned at college. Her courage mirrored mine, reminding me of Mom's stand against a teacher who'd accused me of cheating at 16. Her voice fierce despite her exhaustion. Captain Daniel Brooks had become a pillar, his 30-year tenure shaping pilot training to prioritize equity. Margaret Evans, the passenger who'd shunned me, had stunned me with a $150,000 scholarship donation. Her viral X letter, I judged her by her skin. I'm learning, sparking 20,000 similar confessions. Her transformation stirred hope, proof that even hardened hearts could shift. Emma, though, was a riddle. Her speech at the Aviation Equity Summit, where 500 industry leaders heard her admit her mistakes, had felt like progress. I saw Ms. Marshall as an outsider, she'd said, her voice trembling. Her email, I'm trying to change, had given me pause, but her move to Horizon Air, her interviews slamming my reforms, revealed a woman still tethered to her past. I'd learned she'd mentored younger crew like Sarah Nguyen, instilling a rigid hierarchy where premium meant white and wealthy. At our Dallas cafe meeting, her guarded eyes had betrayed a struggle, regret, warring with pride. I thought I was protecting Skywave, she'd said. You were protecting your fear, I'd replied. Now, her Horizon campaign was gaining ground, their stock up 4%, and a leaked memo suggested she was pitching investors to reclaim Skywave's roots. The irony burned. She was fighting for a system that had hurt me, hurt thousands, and I wondered if her redemption was a facade. The flight attendant, Aisha, approached with a smile. Ms. Marshall, it's a privilege to serve you, she said, her confidence a product of our new training. A scholarship recipient, Aisha's podcast, story overcoming a teacher's doubt to become a crew leader, mirrored my own. Keep shining, I told her, noting her mentorship of new hires like Sarah Nguyen, who'd stayed with Skywave, retrained, and now stood among the graduates I'd addressed last week. Sarah's tearful apology months ago, I didn't know how to stop it, had led her to teach others. Her guilt a catalyst for growth. Michael Hayes had left the industry, his silence a contrast to Emma's noise. The Aviation Equity Summit had been a triumph. 6 airlines adopted our playbook, and the 20-foot Miami mural of me in the butterfly logo drew travelers daily. But a new email from James Larson, our CEO, chilled me. Emma's planning a lawsuit against Skywave for wrongful termination. My pulse quickened. Emma's fight was a storm, and I'd need every Alejandra Daniel eye shot to weather it. I opened my laptop, finalizing the Olivia Marshall Award, a $10,000 prize for employees championing equity, to be awarded at next year's summit. Aisha would be the first, her leadership a beacon. My self-published book, Soaring Equal, had sold 70,000 copies, topping the New York Times bestseller list, its stories of passengers like me fueling X debates. One post read, Olivia Marshall's fight is ours. Let's demand fairness. The response humbled me, but Emma's lawsuit loomed. Horizon's campaign was gaining traction, and her interviews hinted at a broader attack. The industry's losing its soul to forced inclusion. Her words were a dog whistle, rallying those like Robert Klein, who'd called my reforms reckless. I thought of my college roommate, arrested for trespassing in our library, her dreams dimmed by doubt. I wouldn't let Emma dim Skywave's light. As we landed at JFK, Aisha's goodbye was warm, a testament to our new culture. Travelers clapped, some holding my book, others wearing Every Seat Matters pins from our 250,000-strong X campaign. Hannah met me at the gate, her tablet buzzing. Emma's lawsuit is real, she said. She's speaking at a rival summit tomorrow, pushing traditional values. My resolve hardened. I'd built a podcast, a scholarship, an award, but this fight was ongoing. Reflecting on my journey, I saw a girl from Detroit who'd turned slights into strength, a woman who'd faced Emma's hands and built a legacy. I'd learned that change demands courage, not just to stand up, but to keep standing. That allies like Hannah and Aisha make the difference. That even Emma's heart could shift, if only a little. My scar was a reminder. Pain can spark purpose, but only if we act. As I stepped into New York's night, I posted on X, Skywave soars for dignity. Join us. #Every Seat Matters. The post hit 2 million views, but Emma's lawsuit was a thunderclap on the horizon. I looked to the sky, ready for the fight. If you were in a similar situation, facing racial stereotyping, implicit bias or gender bias, how would you approach it to achieve the best possible outcome?